On the night of my wedding, I heard a whisper that still cuts through my soul like a blade. You don't know the truth about this family, and maybe you never should. It wasn't my wife who said it. It was her mother, my mother-in-law, the woman who, from that night on, began to blur the line between blood, trust, and sin. I was 29 years old back then, a simple man working as an office clerk, someone who dreamed of a peaceful marriage, of dinners at a small table, of children's laughter filling a home. I believed I had found all of that in her, my wife, the woman I thought would save me from loneliness. She was kind, quiet, and in her eyes I saw the promise of a future. Her mother, too, seemed gentle at first, so protective of her only daughter. She would smile at me, call me son, and sometimes her hand would rest too long on my shoulder. But I brushed it off as affection, nothing more. The wedding was modest, but filled with laughter. My friends drank until their faces flushed red. My parents blessed us with trembling voices, and the music played late into the night. I remember thinking, this is happiness. This is how life should be. But as the guests left and the house grew quiet, I caught her mother's eyes on me. They lingered, not like a mother watching over her child, but like someone staring into forbidden territory. She whispered that sentence, her breath hot with alcohol, and I laughed it off, convincing myself it was drunken nonsense. Still, something inside me shifted. In the first months, married life was everything I hoped for. My wife would prepare dinner, we'd sit together, and talk about work, about small dreams. I thought I had been given the chance for a normal life. Yet, every time her mother visited, I felt an invisible tension in the room. She would stand too close, ask questions that pierced deeper than they should. Are you happy with her? Does she treat you well? You can always tell me the truth. Sometimes I would wake in the night to find her lingering at the edge of our bed, checking if we were asleep. She would smile when she saw me looking, then vanish into the hallway like a shadow. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was overthinking, that she was simply protective, lonely, clinging to her daughter because her husband had died years ago. But doubt is like a drop of ink in water. It spreads slowly, staining everything. And then, my wife began to change. She stayed late at work more often, her phone glued to her hands, the screen always turned away from me. When I asked what she was doing, she would snap, "Why don't you trust me?" Nights that once held laughter grew silent. She would turn away from me in bed, her body stiff, her warmth fading. I told myself it was just stress, that marriages go through phases. But deep down, I felt something was unraveling. The cruelest part? Her mother filled that silence. She called me, sometimes late at night, pretending she had a question about groceries, about fixing a broken faucet. She'd invite me over when my wife was too busy. I resisted. I told myself it was wrong, that I shouldn't even step foot into her apartment without my wife. But loneliness is a dangerous thing, and temptation disguises itself as comfort. She would pour me a drink, listen to me complain, her hand brushing mine. And one evening, she said it directly, "You don't have to be alone, son." The word son twisted in her mouth like a curse. I wanted to run, to escape the suffocating pull of her gaze. Yet something darker inside me whispered back, "Stay." I tried to confess to my wife, to tell her how uneasy her mother made me feel. But before I could, I overheard a conversation that shattered the fragile shell of my marriage. Late one night, as I returned from work earlier than usual, I heard voices in the kitchen, my wife and her mother. At first, I thought they were arguing, But then came the words that froze my blood. He belongs to me more than to you. And my wife's trembling reply, if you destroy this, you'll destroy everything. I didn't walk in. I couldn't. My legs felt nailed to the floor. I waited until the voices faded, until the house fell silent again. My wife came to bed as if nothing had happened, kissed my cheek with lips that felt colder than stone. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding with questions I was too afraid to ask. What did her mother mean? What secret bound them together? Why did I feel like I was the intruder in my own marriage? And as dawn broke, I realized something terrifying. The tragedy had already begun. After that night, after hearing those words echoing in the kitchen, he belongs to me more than to you, something inside me cracked. It wasn't a clean break, more like a slow fracture spreading across glass. Every look, every touch, every silence in the house felt poisoned. I tried to tell myself it was just a misunderstanding, that maybe I'd misheard, maybe I was imagining things because of fatigue. But once suspicion plants itself, it grows like a weed, twisting around every thought, choking out every bit of peace. My wife started acting even stranger. She used to tell me about her day, about the colleagues she disliked, about silly things like what she wanted for dinner. Now she barely spoke. When she did, it was clipped, rushed, like she wanted to get away from me as quickly as possible. Her phone never left her hand. At night, she placed it face down on the nightstand, the screen lighting up silently while she pretended to sleep. Sometimes she'd smile faintly in the dark, not realizing I was watching. One evening, as I reached for her hand, she pulled away so abruptly, it felt like I had burned her. I'm tired, she muttered, turning her back. It was such a small thing, but it pierced me deeper than a knife. When you share a bed with someone and their body rejects yours, it's not just rejection, it's exile. I lay there, staring at her outline in the dark, wondering if she was thinking about me at all, or if someone else's face filled her mind. Her mother, meanwhile, became a constant presence. Too constant. She called often, using flimsy excuses. The light bulb needed changing. The TV remote wasn't working. She needed help moving a chair. Always small, meaningless tasks that didn't need me, but she wanted me. And the way she looked at me, the way her hand lingered when passing me a glass, it made my skin crawl and my chest tighten all at once. One night, she poured me whiskey and whispered, "She doesn't deserve you. She doesn't know how to love you." I should have left. I should have slammed the door and never looked back. But instead, I sat there in silence, my pulse hammering, shame already wrapping around me like chains. The distance with my wife grew wider by the day. We no longer laughed at breakfast. We no longer planned our weekends. Sometimes she wouldn't even eat with me, claiming she'd already eaten at work. I started checking her stories online, her posts, her late-night activity. She was always busy, always tired. But tired people don't glow. And she had a glow, like a secret flame she was tending, far away from me. The first real crack came one rainy Thursday evening. She left her phone on the table when she went to shower. The screen lit up, and for a moment, I hesitated. I told myself not to look, that trust mattered more than curiosity. But trust was already dead, wasn't it? My fingers moved before my conscience could stop them. The message on the screen wasn't from a man. It was from her mother. "Don't forget tomorrow night. He must never know." I nearly dropped the phone. My blood froze, my heart thundering in my ears. What did it mean? Tomorrow night what? A meeting? A secret? Something they were hiding together? I locked the screen just as she walked out, hair damp, towel wrapped around her. She looked at me, suspicious for a second, then smiled faintly, as if daring me to ask. I didn't. My throat closed up. Instead, I began to watch more closely. I noticed how often she left on Fridays, always claiming team dinners. How she carried a separate bag sometimes, one I'd never seen before. I noticed how she avoided her mother's calls in front of me, only returning them when she thought I wasn't listening. I wanted to confront her. God, I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But every time I opened my mouth, fear strangled me. Fear of the truth. Fear that once spoken, there would be no return. So I did what cowards do. I collected silent evidence. Receipts crumpled in her purse. A restaurant bill for two, dated a night she told me she was working late. Perfume lingering on her clothes. Not the scent she wore, but something heavier, muskier. The faint smear of lipstick on her collar, not her shade. Every discovery drove me deeper into madness. My hands would shake, my stomach twist, yet I told no one. Who could I tell? My friends? My parents? Who would believe that the woman I loved might be hiding something unspeakable with her own mother? I looked at myself in the mirror some nights and didn't recognize the man staring back. Dark circles, bloodshot eyes, paranoia etched into every line of my face. I was no longer a husband. I was a detective, a prisoner of my own obsession. Then came the night that confirmed my worst fears. She said she was going out for drinks with colleagues. I nodded, pretending not to care, but the moment she left, I followed. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I trailed her car through rain-slicked streets, heart pounding with each turn. She didn't go to the city center. She didn't meet colleagues. She drove to a quiet neighborhood, parked outside an apartment building, and vanished inside. My stomach dropped. I sat there in the car, rain hammering the windshield, until my vision blurred. My chest felt like it was collapsing inward. Because I knew that building. I had been there before. It was her mother's apartment. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, replaying every smile, every word, every touch between the two of them in my mind. The puzzle pieces began to lock into place, and the picture they formed was unbearable. The distance, the secrecy, the strange conversations. The message, "Don't forget tomorrow night." The whisper, "He belongs to me more than to you." And suddenly, the unthinkable became the only explanation. I couldn't unsee what I saw that night. My wife walking into her mother's apartment, not as a daughter dropping by, but as someone with a secret rendezvous. The image burned itself into my skull. Rainwater still dripped from my coat, but inside, I was drowning in something far darker. For days afterward, I lived in a haze. I tried to convince myself that maybe it was innocent. Maybe she had gone there for comfort, for advice, for reasons I couldn't understand. But the heart doesn't lie, and mine knew. The way her mother's voice lingered in my ear, the way my wife flinched from my touch, it all pointed to a truth too monstrous to say aloud. Sleep abandoned me. At night, I tossed and turned, my mind replaying every detail. During the day, I walked through life like a ghost. At work, I forgot deadlines. My boss snapped at me for zoning out during meetings. Colleagues whispered. I could feel their eyes on me, though they didn't know the secret I carried. Then came the first undeniable evidence. I returned home early one evening, hoping to surprise her. The house was quiet, lights dimmed. Her phone lay on the sofa, buzzing with a notification. Again, I told myself not to look, but I did.
My hands trembled as I unlocked it. She had carelessly left the code unchanged. What I found made me want to tear the walls down. Messages, dozens of them. Not from a stranger, not from a man, but from her mother. Words that no mother should ever write to her daughter. Last night, I could still feel him in me. He belongs to us, not to the world. Don't be jealous. You'll always be my little girl, but we must share him. My chest heaved. The phone nearly slipped from my grip. I felt bile rising in my throat, my vision darkening around the edges. This wasn't just betrayal. This was sickness. A corruption so deep it made the air in the house unbreathable. The front door clicked open. She walked in, shopping bags in hand, humming softly. She froze when she saw me holding her phone. For a split second, her face turned pale. Then she forced a smile. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice too calm, too rehearsed. I couldn't speak. I just stared at her, at the woman I married, the woman I thought I knew. My hands shook as I held up the phone. Her eyes flickered, panic flashing behind them, but it was gone in an instant. She laughed, actually laughed. "You're imagining things. Those are private jokes between Mom. Don't twist them." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But the laughter sounded hollow, brittle, like glass ready to shatter. I slammed the phone down on the table, the screen cracking. "Do you take me for a fool?" I shouted, my voice breaking. "I saw you. I followed you. I know where you've been." Her smile vanished. Her lips trembled, then twisted into something I'd never seen before, a mix of rage and fear. "So you spy on me now? You creep into my phone? You stalk me like a criminal?" The reversal hit me like a slap. Suddenly, I was the one under attack, accused, cornered. She stormed past me, slamming doors, shouting that I was paranoid, sick, controlling. I sat there, shaking, crushed under the weight of her denial. Maybe this was her weapon, turn the blame on me, make me question my own sanity. But deep down, I knew the truth was festering, waiting to burst. The days that followed were unbearable. Tension filled every room. She barely spoke to me, except to hurl accusations. Meals were silent, eyes averted. Nights were colder than any winter. And her mother called even more.
I could hear her voice through the thin walls when my wife locked herself in the bedroom to talk, whispering, laughing, sometimes crying, always shutting me out. I began to wonder if the whole world was in on it. Family dinners became suffocating. My father-in-law, long estranged, never appeared, but my wife's relatives cast sidelong glances at me, whispering as if they knew something I didn't. Even neighbors seemed to stare too long when I walked by. Maybe it was just paranoia, or maybe the secret had already spread like wildfire. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted her again, this time with the receipts I'd found in her purse. Expensive wine, hotel bookings, meals for two. I threw them on the table, my voice shaking with rage. "Explain this. Explain everything before I lose my mind." Her face hardened. She grabbed the papers, tore them to shreds, and screamed, "You're destroying this marriage with your obsession. You're the problem, not me." Neighbors must have heard, because lights flicked on across the street, curtains shifting. Shame burned my skin. Our home had become a stage, our screams the performance. I wanted to strike back, to shout the truth so the whole world would hear. But something stopped me. Fear. Not fear of her, not even fear of her mother. Fear of what would happen once the words left my mouth. Once truth is spoken, it can't be swallowed again.
Instead, I retreated. I sat in the dark, my heart pounding like a war drum, telling myself that I needed proof, real proof, undeniable proof. So I made my decision. I would stop being the victim in this nightmare. I would follow them. I would dig. I would uncover the truth no matter how much it tore me apart. Because now, the whispers were no longer enough. I needed to see. I needed to know. And when I did, there would be no way back. The decision weighed on me like iron chains, but it gave me purpose. I could no longer live in shadows, tortured by half-truths and suspicions. I had to see it with my own eyes. And so, one damp evening, I followed her again. She thought she was careful. She left the house with a casual air, purse slung over her shoulder, saying she was meeting a friend for coffee. I pretended to nod, my voice flat, as if I believed her. The moment she turned the corner, I slipped out the back door and trailed her through the maze of dimly lit streets. The city felt like it was holding its breath. Every sound, footsteps, car horns, whispers, seemed sharper, louder. My pulse hammered in my ears as I kept my distance, careful not to draw her attention. She moved quickly, nervously, glancing over her shoulder once, twice. And then I saw it. She wasn't heading to a cafe. She was going to the same apartment, her mother's. I pressed myself against a wall, hiding in the shadows as she knocked. The door opened almost instantly, as if her mother had been waiting. Their faces lit up in a way that no ordinary family greeting could explain. My stomach lurched. I could see the tenderness, the hunger in their eyes. They vanished inside, and the door clicked shut. I stood frozen, drenched in the cold night air, fighting the urge to kick the door open and scream. But I didn't. I stayed there for an eternity, my fists clenched, until the muffled sounds drifted through the thin walls. Laughter. Then silence. Then something else. Soft moans, indistinct but unmistakable. The world tilted. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. Every fiber of me screamed to deny it, to pretend it was just my imagination. But the sounds kept coming, rhythmical, obscene. My chest tightened, my lungs refusing air. When I finally stumbled away, I wasn't the same man. I was hollow, stripped bare, carrying an image I could never erase. For days, I drifted in a fog. At work, words on documents blurred, conversations slipped past me. At home, I avoided her eyes, terrified that if I looked too long, I would see the truth staring back at me. She noticed. Of course she did. One night, as we sat at the dinner table in suffocating silence, she slammed her fork down and hissed, "What is wrong with you? Why are you looking at me like that?" I couldn't stop myself. The words spilled out, jagged and raw. "Because I hear you. I hear what you and your mother do." Her face went pale, then crimson. "You're insane," she spat. "Do you even hear yourself? You've lost your mind." But the tremor in her voice betrayed her. I saw fear flash across her eyes, fleeting but real. She knew I knew. We argued until our throats were raw. She hurled plates, screamed that I was sick, paranoid, obsessed. I shouted back, accusing her of betrayal so vile it didn't belong in human language. The walls shook with our rage. The neighbors must have heard every word. And yet, in the aftermath, when silence finally descended, I felt no relief, only exhaustion, only the heavy knowledge that this was just the beginning. Because the circle was widening, her mother began to appear more often. She showed up at our door with food, with excuses, with that strange gaze that made my skin crawl. She called me son in front of others, but when our eyes met, I felt something darker beneath the word. A claim, a possession. Neighbors whispered. I caught them staring when I walked by, their voices dropping to hushed tones. At family gatherings, conversations stopped when I entered. Smiles faltered. My father's absence loomed heavier than ever, as if the entire family carried some unspeakable truth they dared not voice. One evening, I walked into the living room to find my wife and her mother sitting close, their conversation ending abruptly the moment I appeared. They looked at me with identical expressions, cold, guarded, as if I were the intruder in my own house. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I demanded the truth. I cornered her, my voice shaking with fury and desperation. "Tell me, damn it! Tell me what you two are hiding!" She broke. Tears streamed down her face, her hands trembling. But instead of confession, she lashed out, screaming, "Why can't you just leave it alone? Why can't you love me enough to stop digging?" The words cut deeper than any admission. She didn't deny it this time. She begged for my silence instead. And that was when I knew. The truth wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to the world outside, waiting like a predator in the dark. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of the city. The house was quiet, but I could feel the storm building. I could feel the walls closing in. I needed proof, not just for me, but for everyone who doubted, for every whispering neighbor, every prying relative, every voice in my own head that still tried to tell me I was crazy. So I started planning. I would follow them again. This time, I would bring something more than my eyes. A camera, a recorder, something no one could deny. Because this nightmare wasn't just mine anymore. It was about to burst into the open, and when it did, none of us would survive unchanged. The stage was set.
The masks were slipping, and I was ready to tear them all off. The plan was simple, almost crude, but simplicity was the only weapon left to me. One Saturday evening, I told her I would be working late. She barely looked up from her phone, muttering something non-committal. That was my confirmation. I slipped out, circled back through the alleys, and waded across the street from her mother's apartment. The camera in my pocket felt heavier than a gun. Every second dragged, my heartbeat so loud I feared it would give me away. At last, she arrived. My wife. Dressed too carefully for a casual visit, her hair styled, her steps quick and eager. She rang the bell, and when the door opened, her mother pulled her inside with an embrace that lasted too long, too intimate. I lifted the camera. My hands shook, but I forced myself to focus, to record. Through the thin curtains, shapes moved. Laughter drifted out. Then silence. Then the unmistakable rhythm of bodies colliding in the dark. I filmed everything I could. Not because I wanted to. God, no. Every second was a blade carving into my chest. But I needed proof. Proof that would strip away the lies once and for all. When I stumbled back home, I felt like I'd carried a corpse on my back. My wife returned hours later, humming softly, as if nothing in the world could trouble her. She didn't notice the camera hidden beneath the stack of books on my desk. She didn't notice the death in my eyes. The next day, I called for a family dinner. Her mother, and a few relatives who still dared to pretend everything was normal. Even my uncle came, his face drawn, his gaze wary. He must have sensed the storm in the air. We gathered around the table. Plates clinked, forced laughter filled the room, but beneath it all, tension coiled like a serpent. My wife sat close to her mother, their arms brushing, their glances too frequent. I cleared my throat. The chatter died. Every eye turned to me. "I have something to show you," I said. My voice was calm, almost gentle, though my hands trembled. I placed the laptop on the table and pressed play. At first, confusion. Then, silence. Then, the horror set in. Faces paled, mouths fell open, gasps escaped. The footage was undeniable. Shadows moving, bodies entwined, moans piercing the quiet. Even without clarity, the intimacy was unmistakable. My wife screamed, lunging at the laptop, but I shoved her back. "No more lies," I roared. "Everyone sees it now. Everyone knows." Her mother clutched her chest, eyes wide, muttering incoherently. The relatives shifted in their seats, some covering their faces, others staring at me with a mix of pity and revulsion. My uncle whispered something under his breath. Prayer or curse, I couldn't tell. The room erupted. Shouts, sobs, denials. My wife clawed at me, shrieking that I was cruel, that I had destroyed us all. But I only laughed, a hollow, broken laugh that echoed off the walls. "No," I spat. "You destroyed us long ago." Neighbors must have heard, because soon there were knocks at the door, voices calling, questions asked. And then, as if fate itself conspired, one of them pushed inside, saw the screen, and gasped. The secret bled into the street like spilled wine. By nightfall, the whole neighborhood knew. Whispers turned into shouts, judgment flared like wildfire. Children pointed, women gossiped, men shook their heads in disgust. My name, my wife's name, her mother's name, all dragged through the mud, carved into the air like curses. She collapsed, wailing, begging me to undo it. Her mother sat in silence, eyes glazed, as though her spirit had already fled. And me, I felt no triumph, only emptiness. The exposure hadn't set me free. It had only chained me deeper. That night, I sat alone on the balcony, cigarette smoke curling into the humid air. The streets buzzed with rumors. The phones never stopped ringing. Relatives disowned us, friends vanished. We were pariahs, stripped of dignity, thrown to the wolves of public scorn. She locked herself in the bedroom, refusing food, crying until her voice cracked. I heard her through the walls, the sound like nails on glass. Her mother didn't return home. She vanished, leaving behind silence thicker than blood. I thought I would feel vindicated. Instead, I felt like I had burned my own house to the ground, only to find myself still trapped inside the flames. In the days that followed, the humiliation spread beyond the neighborhood. At work, colleagues avoided my gaze. Strangers whispered when I walked by. Even the grocer smirked when he handed me change. Everywhere I turned, eyes followed, judging, condemning. I had unleashed the truth, but it hadn't cleansed me. It had only branded me. At night, I lay awake listening to her muffled sobs. Sometimes she cursed me. Sometimes she cursed herself. Sometimes she whispered apologies I could no longer believe. I began to wonder, had I really exposed them for justice? Or had I done it simply to drag them down with me? To make sure no one walked away unscathed? The line between vengeance and salvation blurred, until there was nothing left but ruin. And yet, even in that ruin, a part of me whispered, "This is only the beginning. The real punishment has yet to come." The morning after the explosion, silence reigned in the house like a corpse lying in the middle of the room. No one dared to touch it. No one dared to speak. My wife stayed locked in the bedroom. Her mother had vanished completely. Some whispered she had fled the city. Others claimed she had collapsed in a relative's home. I didn't care enough to find out. But the outside world cared. Oh, they cared too much. By noon, my phone was vibrating endlessly.
Colleagues, friends, even distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted to confirm the scandal. The footage had traveled faster than I imagined. Someone at that dinner must have copied it, spreading it like wildfire. I became both victim and executioner in their eyes. Some pitied me, some mocked me, and some praised me for the brutal exposure. But none of it mattered. The humiliation was the same, sharp, raw, unrelenting. My wife finally emerged 3 days later. Her face was swollen from crying, her eyes bloodshot, her hair matted. She looked less like a woman and more like a ghost clinging to the last threads of flesh. She begged me, on her knees, to delete the video, to retract everything, to at least salvage a fragment of dignity. I stared down at her. Once I had loved her enough to carve the stars from the sky for her. Now she looked like a stranger whose skin carried nothing but betrayal. "You think this ends with a file on a laptop?" I asked. My voice was low, almost a growl. "You ended it long before I pressed play." She collapsed, sobbing until she vomited on the floor. I stepped over her and walked out. Divorce came swiftly. Not because she agreed. No, she fought, pleaded, tried to claw her way back into my life. But the court saw the evidence, the testimony, the community's disgust. It was a spectacle, the kind that stains every page of a man's history. Her mother didn't even attend the hearings. She sent a lawyer, pale and stiff, who barely spoke. By then, whispers about her had turned into shouts.
Shops refused to serve her, relatives closed their doors, and friends stopped answering calls. I heard she was living alone, curtains drawn, afraid to step outside. The same woman who once smirked with triumph had become a shadow chased by shame. That was her karma. As for my wife, the divorce stripped her of everything. Custody denied. Assets split unevenly. Reputation burned beyond recognition. She tried to return to work, but her colleagues avoided her like a plague. Within weeks, she quit, too ashamed to face their stares. She sent me messages, sometimes apologies, sometimes curses, sometimes threats of ending her life. I read them all, then deleted them. My heart felt nothing. Not hatred, not pity. Just a hollow void where love had once lived. But here's the cruel truth. Vengeance didn't heal me. If anything, it deepened the wound. I had destroyed them, yes, but I had also destroyed myself in the process. At work, I wasn't respected. I was pitied. At home, the walls echoed with emptiness. Even when I walked through the city, people's eyes burned into me, not with admiration, but with curiosity, as if I were some circus animal on display. Nights were the worst. The bed felt too large, too cold. I would lie awake, replaying every moment. The first time she smiled at me, the day we married, the way her hand once fit so perfectly in mine. And then, the betrayal, the moans, the laughter, the shadows on the screen. I drank to numb it. Cigarettes filled the silence. But nothing dulled the memory. Nothing killed the ghost. It was then I realized, karma wasn't just theirs. It was mine too. For trusting blindly, for loving too deeply, for choosing vengeance instead of silence. Still, part of me clung to survival. I refused to let the ashes be my only legacy. I threw myself into work, long hours, endless projects. Slowly, grudgingly, my colleagues stopped whispering. Slowly, I built something resembling respect again. Months passed. My wife's name faded from conversation.
Her mother became a ghost story neighbors whispered about to scare their children. Life, as it always does, moved on. But scars remain. One night, late, as I sifted through old emails, I found a message sent from an unknown account. It was only one sentence. "You ruined me, but I will never let you forget." I deleted it without replying, but sleep never came that night, because in that sentence I heard not just her voice, but the echo of my own conscience, reminding me that some wounds never close. And so I lived, half in shadow, half in survival. I had torn the web apart, but its threads still clung to me, sticky, suffocating. I knew one truth. There was no going back. The past was a graveyard, and I was both mourner and gravedigger. But somewhere deep inside, a cruel satisfaction lingered. Justice, in its twisted form, had been served. And though the world might forget, I never would, because this story was carved into my skin, written into my blood, and it wasn't finished yet. Years have passed since the day everything collapsed, but it feels as if no time has passed at all. The wounds never truly healed. They merely scabbed over, thin and fragile, ready to tear open with the slightest touch. I live now in a small apartment on the edge of the city. Nobody knows me here, and that is exactly how I prefer it. I am just another man walking the streets, another face in the crowd, another soul drowning quietly in his own silence. Every morning, I wake before dawn. The city sleeps, but I cannot. My body rises, restless, as if punishment itself drags me out of bed. I sit by the window, coffee in hand, and watch the first buses rattle down the empty streets. People on their way to work, chasing their small routines, blind to the storms that may one day swallow them whole. And then, night comes. Nights are always the same. A bottle on the table, a notebook open, and my hand trembling as I write words no one will ever read. Words like these, words of confession. Not because I seek forgiveness. God knows forgiveness is not for me, but because silence is heavier than death itself. Sometimes, in the dark, I hear her voice, my wife, my once beloved, once enemy. She comes in fragments, a laugh, a whisper, a sob. I turn, but the room is always empty. Sometimes I see her standing in the corner, her white wedding dress stained red, her eyes accusing, her lips trembling with words she cannot speak. Other times it is her mother I see, my mother-in-law, the woman who blurred every line, who opened a door that should have remained locked forever. In my dreams, she is not angry anymore. Instead, she weeps. "Forgive me," she whispers. But the echo is hollow, because how do you forgive the unforgivable? I thought exposure, humiliation, divorce, these would be the end. But no, that was only the beginning of a different kind of prison. A prison without bars, but built of memory, shame, and regret. What is worse than betrayal? Living after it. I watch families in the park sometimes. A husband pushing a stroller, a wife laughing at something silly, their child clapping her hands. They look ordinary, boring even. But to me, it is a cruel kind of beauty, one I once held and shattered with my own hands. And then I wonder, how many of them hide secrets like mine? How many smiles mask sins waiting to explode? How many fathers and mothers sleep beside each other, unaware of the lies buried between their sheets? The truth is this: we all bury something, a mistake, a desire, a betrayal. We bury it deep,
praying it will never claw its way back to the surface. But it does, always. Because truth is not a corpse, it is a parasite. And when it resurfaces, it reeks. It poisons everything it touches. That is the lesson I want to leave you. Don't believe for a second that a secret is safe. It rots in silence, it grows in darkness, and when it bursts, it will devour everyone, lover, child, family, future. If I had spoken earlier, if I had faced the small cracks before they split the entire foundation, maybe I wouldn't be here. Maybe my life would still hold warmth instead of ashes. But I didn't. And so I live in exile, condemned not by a judge, but by myself. There are nights when the thought of ending it presses hard against my mind. A rope, a blade, a bottle of pills. It would be so easy. But then I remember. Death is not escape. Death is confrontation. In death, I would see them again. My wife, her mother, my father's disappointed eyes. And I cannot bear that. Not here, not in the next world. So I remain, a man half dead, walking the narrow line between punishment and survival. My pen is my noose, my words my execution. If you are hearing this, if my voice still carries through the cracks of this broken confession, take it as a warning. Do not mistake blood ties for immunity. Do not mistake silence for safety. Do not mistake temptation for love. Because once you cross the line, you cannot uncross it. I did. And now I live as proof. Proof that desire can twist into chains. That love can rot into poison. That family can devour itself from within.
When people ask me who I am, I smile a tired smile and give the only answer left. I am the man who loved the wrong woman. I am the husband who betrayed his own blood. I, the sinner who lost everything. And this, all of this, is my confession.